Well, howdy y'all. So today's topic that I wanted to talk about is something that I think that Americans in general, I know that, there's many other people who probably struggle with the same thing, but I think Americans especially have a hard time knowing when to use their tongue and when not to. Just things that I notice in today's society is no one can have silence. There always has to be some sort of noise going on, whether that be, in your car, listening to music, whether that be being in your home and you just have to have the TV or the radio going. People have people actually, pay to get their cars to sound really loud. People need noise in order to sleep. And some of those things there's nothing wrong with, if you need noise to sleep. But it's just, an example that I have that we can't really have silence. Like when especially in conversations, if you meet someone that, you haven't seen in a while and you start talking and then the conversation gets silent, people feel very awkward. Like they don't like that feeling. They see it as almost embarrassing, just kind of sitting there in silence. But one thing that I've had to learn personally, because I struggle with that a lot, like I was like, man, I just can't talk to people because it always ends up going silent and it always gets weird. But one thing that I've had to realize is there's nothing wrong with silence. We don't always have to have something to say. And so today, guys, I want to go through scripture and just kind of give you the biblical perspective on when to use your tongue and when not to use your tongue and how often you should use your tongue. So believe it or not, the scripture speaks so much about the tongue, and just in Proverbs alone has 54 verses talking about the tongue. And so I'm going to go over a few of the Proverbs because they're so rich and so helpful. And one that always pops into my head when I seem like I'm talking too much or something like that is Proverbs 10:19, which basically says, "Where words are many, transgressions are not lacking." And I find that to be true. We sit there and we talk and we talk and we talk and we feel like we always have to be saying something, and eventually we end up saying something that we didn't mean to say, or say something that we shouldn't say, or it's just the more that you talk, the more likely you are to say something you shouldn't. Especially in James, I think it's chapter 3, if I'm not mistaken. He says that every animal has been tamed by humans, but the tongue can never be tamed. He says if you're able to tame your tongue, then the whole rest of your body would be in check and you'd be a perfect man. So no person can tame the tongue, but we can discipline it. Because over and over in scripture talks about we need to discipline our tongues, make sure we're not, talking too much and all of that. Anyway, I'm going to go through the scriptures because I don't want to just keep talking just to talk, but give you what God says about it. So let's dive right into it. And just a disclaimer, there's nothing wrong with talking. Like, it's not sinful to talk, because obviously the Lord gave us a tongue, but there's a time and a place for everything. And so, there's sometimes to be quiet. There's sometimes that it's okay to have silence. But just to let you guys know it, I'm not saying that talking is sinful, talking anything. That it's just disciplining it like everything else. Just making sure you're not overdoing it. But anyway, here's some verses that I'm going to read to you guys. So I gave you that one verse, Proverbs 10:19. Here is Proverbs 13:3. It says, "Whoever guards his mouth preserves his life. He who opens wide his lips comes to ruin." It's just sort of the same idea here. Okay, so here's Proverbs 17:27. "Whoever restrains his words has knowledge, and he who has a cool spirit is a man of understanding." So I think that, in multiple cases, a lot of people, because even Christ in the gospel says, don't pray like the Gentiles who think that they'll be heard for their many words. God doesn't want us to have, like I told you guys in my What's Your Motive video, God doesn't want many words that's just gonna kind of babble out. You're not gonna. He doesn't hear you because you have a lot of words to say. Like I told you in that video, Christ gives us an example prayer that's maybe 5 to 10 seconds long. but there's so much richness in it. So it's not really about the quantity, but the quality. So it's sort of like your tongue, you know, it's not really about the quantity of how much you speak, it's the quality of what you speak. And so just, you know, whoever restrains his words has knowledge. You're wise if you can restrain your lips. Learn to teach your tongue when to speak and when not to speak, when to speak and when to hold your tongue. I know that I struggle with that sometimes. You know, I'll have like this idea in my head, and so I'll just speak. It ends up being, you know, like I won't even be thinking, like somebody says something to me and I have to shoot something, you know, right back. Maybe not in an argument sense, but just I'm not listening, I'm speaking. Proverbs 29, 20. And this one I thought was really, really good. So it says, do you see a man who is hasty in his words? So do you see a person who's quick to speak? There is more hope for a fool than for him. You know, and again, like I'm saying, not every single word that you speak is going to be sinful, but just like what the scripture says, you will be held accountable for every idle word that you speak. And I'm guilty of this, you know, massively. I struggle a lot with just saying things just to say them. They may not be bad, they may not be mean, they may not be anything, but I just, you know, speak just to speak sometimes. And so we need to remember that talking itself is not wrong. Neither is, let's just take gluttony for a example. Eating is not bad, but if you do it in excess, if you do it too much, it becomes sinful. So there's plenty, like I said, there's 54 verses in the book of Proverbs, but I'm only going to go over those for the sake of the length of the video. But anyway, we'll move on to Ecclesiastes. There's one verse that I want to look at. So this is Ecclesiastes 3:7. A time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. And I think that you know, wraps it up perfectly. There's a time for everything. Just like if you keep reading, you know, the next verse and then a few verses back, it says a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck up what's been planted, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down, a time to build up, a time to weep, a time to laugh. There's a time and a place for everything. So I think that sums it up pretty good. Is if you can learn, if we can learn as a society to speak, you know, when it's our time to speak when it's the time to speak, and if we could learn to keep silent when it's our time to keep, if we can learn, you know, what that is. So I thought that was very good. But then we're going to move on to the New Testament and see what the New Testament has to say. Okay, so the first one in the New Testament that we're going to be looking at is Colossians 4:6. Ooh, that sun's glaring bad. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you ought to answer each person. So let your speech always be gracious. You know, don't let it be haughty. Don't let it be overpowering. You know, always let it be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that way you can know how to answer each person. So an example, and I'm going to give you the scripture in the next few verses. But you know, if we can be silent and let the other person speak, then we can sit here and ponder on, okay, how can I answer this person with graciousness? But if, you know, we don't agree with their idea or something like that, and we just throw their idea out, we're really easy to shut them down with our speech. But that's not gracious. That's not helpful. And so I think that, just like Paul says here, let your speech always be gracious. Like, always be patient with the person that you're talking to, even if you don't agree with what they're saying. Just be gracious and kind, because, you know, another verse that just popped into my head is a soft answer turns away wrath. If someone's mad at you, you know, and they're kind of yelling at you, but you answer with graciousness, you answer with kindness, and it's a soft answer. You know, it calms the person down, because like, why would you answer me in that way? So I think that, you know, that is so good, and that's a verse that pops into my head, is just answer with grace, answer with kindness. So this is the verse that I was just talking to you guys about. It says, know this, my beloved brothers, let each person be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. For the anger of a man does not produce the righteousness of God. And so if we can be quick to hear what these other people are saying, whether we agree with them or not, and then slow to speak, not just to throw out our opinion, and then slow to anger, because sometimes conversations can anger a person. and be slow to anger, then, you know, that's great. For it says, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. So don't, you know, don't get angry. Be slow to anger when it comes to speaking. And then, so the last one that we're going to be looking at today is going to be 1 Peter 3:10. So it says, do not repay evil for evil, reviling for reviling, but on the contrary bless. For to this you were called, that you may obtain a blessing. For whoever desires to love life and see good days, let him keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. So there's one more, you know, a lot of the time, you know, and I find it, you know, true to be in my life too, is, you know, if somebody says something you don't like, we usually answer back, jabbing back at them or getting angry or something like that, where Scripture repeatedly in the New Testament and even in the Old Testament always says to be gracious in your speech. Even if somebody's thing makes you angry, answer in a soft tone. Be gracious, answer in a soft tone, because it will turn away wrath. And so I just want to make this video because I think that, you know, like I said in the beginning of the video, America struggles a lot with when to use their tongue and when not to use their tongue. We're not really taming it. Sometimes we just speak just to speak idle words. Sometimes we speak because we don't want silence, and silence is kind of awkward, or we speak too hastily, you know, when we're having a conversation, and sometimes we just need to step back and listen, you know. And if you're having a conversation and the conversation gets silent, let it be silent. You know, it's good to have silence sometimes. I mean, just like it says, it's good to there's a time to speak and there's a time to be silent. So we don't always have to be speaking. A lot of the time it's actually really, really peaceful to have silence, just like out here. You know, all I hear is the birds chirping. And anyway, guys, I hope this video made sense, and I hope that we all practice together as the family of God to try to tame our tongues as much as we can, because again, like James says, we can't fully tame our tongue. But over and over in Scripture, it does say to discipline your tongue. You know, be disciplined in it. You may not be able to fully tame it, because if you fully tame it, then you're a perfect man. But we can discipline it and kind of practice when to speak and when not to speak. So anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. Super thankful for you guys tuning in and listening. I just pray that the family of God gets closer and closer to the Lord and to one another, and that we would stay unstained from the world. Until next time, keep swimming upstream.